Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm Judith Rose, Acting Director of Villa Albertine, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the last installment of the Museum Series. Tonight we have the pleasure to be joined by Souraya Noujaim, Director of the Department of Islamic Arts of the Musée du Louvre, and Alexandra Munroe, Senior Curator at Large at the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum and Foundation. Since its first installment on March 8th this year, the Museum Series has brought together 24 women leaders from some of the most prestigious museums in the United States, France, and beyond. With the ambition of providing new insights on the current challenges faced by museums, the series sought to represent their diversity while addressing shared topics such as leadership, community engagement, education, cooperation, and international partnerships. With the help of François Bridet, Museums and Cultural Heritage Attaché at Villa Albertine, we have been pleased and honored to organize this series in partnership with the Center for Curatorial Leadership and its director and co-founder, Elizabeth Easton, who has graciously served as co-curator and moderator of these discussions. Heartfelt thank you, dear Buffy, for your commitment, passion, and audacious spirit. We owe the success of this series in large part to you. While this evening marks the conclusion of the 2023 Museum Series, it does not bring an end to the discussions that it has inspired. I'm pleased to announce that a special issue of States, Villa Albertine's magazine, is planned to be released in spring 2024, providing us an opportunity to reflect on the countless ideas that have emerged over the course of the Museum Series dialogues. Villa Albertine will also continue to support the conversation on the future of museums through its Museums Next Generation initiative, a transatlantic exchange program aimed at engaging emerging museum professionals. After a successful first edition this year, in which 16 French and American curators crossed the Atlantic, the program will be renewed in 2024 and for the next 4 years, thanks to a generous donor who wishes to remain anonymous. Today, we launched a call for French applicants interested in traveling to Los Angeles and New York, and this spring, we'll select the American curators to travel to France next fall. Now, before handing the floor to Buffy, let me briefly introduce tonight's speakers. First, we are pleased to welcome Souraya Noujaim, to my right, who has served as the director of the Department of Islamic Arts at the Musée du Louvre since June 2023. Before that, Souraya worked at the Agence France Museum and Louvre Abu Dhabi as chief curator of the 5th to 15th century collections, becoming the scientific director of the newly opened museum in 2018. An internationally recognized expert in Islamic art, she has published extensively on the collections of the Louvre and the British Museum and curated many notable exhibitions. Her most recent one, entitled Letters of Light, opened last September at the Louvre Abu Dhabi and is dedicated to the birth of the 3 monotheistic religions, their sacred writings, and their disseminations across different languages and cultures. Thank you, Souraya, for bringing your experience as a museum leader and as a scholar to enrich tonight's discussion. We are equally pleased to be joined by Alexandra Munroe, Senior Curator at Large for Global Arts at the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum and Foundation, where she has led the Guggenheim's Asian Art Initiative since its founding in 2006. From 2018 to 2023, she served as Senior Curator and Director of Curatorial Affairs for the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi. An authority on modern and contemporary Asian art, Alexandra has curated over 40 exhibitions and led pioneering scholarship on many celebrated artists, such as Yayoi Kusama, Daido Moriyama, Li Yufan, and Yoko Ono. Alexandra, we warmly thank you for joining us tonight. The richness of your experiences in the US, Abu Dhabi, and Japan, where you lived for many years, will undoubtedly spark thought-provoking dialogue tonight. I'd finally like to express my very special thanks to Agnes Gant, Marie-Josée Craves, Denise Littlefield-Sobel, Sana Sabag, and Beatrice Stern for their generous support for the museum series. It's been a pleasure to collaborate with them and with all of you to bring this series to life. I wish you a very pleasant evening. And Buffy, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. This is my swan song on these conversations I never thought I would be a part of, but that I've enjoyed so much. And I will say, the Center for Curatorial Leadership, which I run, had the opportunity also of going to France with François Bridet on this curatorial exchange program, which I have to say, as I evaluate the year, was a shot in the arm. It was a revelation for everybody on the CCL team who went with the 6 American curators. And I think it will be transformative for training young people in global understanding, which is where we begin our conversation today with 2 museums that at a certain moment in time decided to expand globally. And actually, of all the conversations, this is the first time the 2 participants in the conversation knew each other and have actually had the opportunity to work together in Abu Dhabi. But Souraya, I would like to begin with you, who has traveled the furthest to get here today, and just ask you to describe a little bit what it was like in Abu Dhabi when you got there, how it related to your training and background, and what it was like when you left. We'll get to the Louvre after that, but I think the groundwork of Abu Dhabi would be of great interest.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I lived 10 years in Abu Dhabi, and when I arrived 10 years ago, there was, it was a building site. The cultural district that is now growing very, very fast with the Louvre Abu Dhabi, the Guggenheim, other institutions on the way. It was a building site, and I think, yes, you have here on the screen an image of the future Guggenheim. This island, cultural island, was reachable only by boat, and yeah, so 10 years in the making, and the whole landscape, cultural landscape, has tremendously changed, and with those big institutions that, as you said, wanted to be global and travel the world, but also there is the national museums, and there is big development in this area. How was it living in Abu Dhabi? It was fantastic. This sort of vibes when you do a project, when you build a project from scratch. It's very,
so what
very
had been
rewarding.
Done when you got there? Laurence Descartes had been working on the project in the very beginning, and then what was there when you arrived?
So Laurence Descartes, yes, has been constructing the first scientific and cultural program of the museum. And when I got there, it was a building site. So we had to finish the building, finish the collection, set up the galleries, build a team, build an activity ranging from collections to temporary exhibitions to research. So really setting up the activity, the day-to-day life of a museum. And in my team, for example, we started 3 and we ended 50, I think. Yeah.
But the first question I usually ask in this series, because it matters so much to me, is that scholars have been running institutions. And it's very important, I think Philippe has written a lot about that as well, that the person making the decisions about an institution actually has a deep-seated training in the history of art. And so you were a scholar, and yet you're handed a kind of tabula rasa of an institution and how to build it. So do you, before I get to Alexandra, do you want to just give us the flavor of 2 or 3 things that you had to learn in order to go from the field of your expertise to the decisions that you had to make for the Louvre Abu Dhabi?
I think what I brought with me was not only my expertise in Islamic art, but the very deep knowledge of the history and languages also. But then you have to be hard worker and to be extremely flexible. As this is and this was a not only multitasked, but we had to deal with different governmental entities, and the network of decisions was as dense, I tend to say, as the dome and yes, here it is of the Louvre Abu Dhabi. So
let me move to Alexandra, because the Louvre Abu Dhabi opened in 2017. So almost a decade later, we're waiting for the Guggenheim. So your entry into this world, you have a deep-seated training in Asian art, Asian languages, you've lived in Asia, and then you take on this responsibility. Do you want to describe to the audience just what that was like and what you came into after an equally long period of gestation, but not quite the realization yet of the building?
Well, thank you, Buffy, and thank you again for organizing this and leading it. And all of us in the museum world just want to thank you so much for the mentorship and inspiration that you have given to so many curators. And occasionally when some of us have crises in our career, we call you, and you have always given the most extraordinary advice. 2 things I just want to say. Number 1, I did not do this alone. I have been part, certainly, of the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi since the inception. I mean, really, I remember the night we pulled an all-nighter for a full weekend with Valerie Hillings and Nancy Spector and stayed up and wrote what became the 3 pillars of the future Guggenheim Abu Dhabi as a concept, which was the number 1, a collection and a program that would be dated from around 1960 for reasons I can get into later, but since that inspiration, that date has become extremely productive and central to defining who we are as a period. Number 2 was really centering ourselves in the region and ensuring that a huge part of our collection, a huge part of our scholarship, that we would be reorienting a history of modern contemporary art through the lens of the region. And the third kind of pillar of this is what we have always struggled with to call it, but transculturalism or transnationalism, to really take an approach that is not simply looking at modern and contemporary Western art from familiar canonical history, but from what we might now call a decolonial set of perspectives, but looking at centers of art around the world that may have been using similar languages of abstraction or minimalism or conceptualism, or indigenous forms of art, or excavation of one's cultural past, or language, or calligraphy, and what those contact zones were, what those intersections were, to look at global art history as really something very, very interconnected. But this is not alone. There were many, many authors to this, and I had the enormous privilege with Richard Armstrong. Richard is here, who is the great champion of this project, and really took it from kind of a very amorphous sort of idea, wasn't even an idea, it was a plan, into real reality and real implementation. So enormous kudos to Richard, and it was such a joy for this 5-year period when I was leading on curatorial to work so closely with Richard, so thank you. But I do remember, sorry, I can't remember if you were there or not, 2010-ish, when all of us, it was the Louvre Abu Dhabi, it was the British Museum that was then also advising on the Sheikh Zayed National Museum and the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi. None of us had been allowed to talk to each other before, but we were all in a room for 5 days or so presenting our then very incipient ideas. So you ask, what are scholars doing in this role? We're dreaming. We are reinventing from the history and collections and identity of the Louvre and what the Guggenheim has been standing for, which is primarily innovation, and what an incipient idea of a national museum could be. We were given the task to, if you could build from scratch, what would it be? What mistakes wouldn't you be making? What would you imagine is going to be relevant for the 21st century, which you could never retrospectively insert into your program in Paris or New York? And that is an extraordinary opportunity and privilege. And I think everyone who's worked on this, yes, we face challenges that we've never faced before in any other part of our career as curators or scholars, but it has been an amazing opportunity.
So this is a good segue to my next question, which is for Souraya. You are now working at the Louvre, so you have come back, dare I say, to the mothership, but maybe that's a complete misnomer now. But what do you bring back with you that you learned there? I think what we were talking in our preparatory, actually we had such a rich preparatory phone call. I said, well, we've done this program. I don't think we need to share it with the public. But that notion of, who gives something to whom? There's a lot, I assume, that you got from Abu Dhabi that you bring back to the Louvre. So do you want to share a little bit of that?
I got a lot from Abu Dhabi, definitely. From one Louvre to another was the opening exhibition in 2017, the first temporary exhibition. So it was the Louvre Paris, bringing the history of the museums and the history of the Louvre and all in Abu Dhabi. So 5-6 years on, going back to the Louvre Paris, I'll definitely bring new perspective and probably the ideas of connectivity. That's decentralization, decompartmentalization of the work, of the approach of art history. In my field, Islamic art, I will definitely not look at Islamic art with the same eye. It will be probably rethinking the perspective itself and the way you look at an object and you define an object from not only an art history perspective, but also from an anthropological perspective and a civilization also perspective. So putting things in context, yes, and seeing through the objects and probably beyond the objects. On a personal basis, I will bring the energy. I used to say that I used to come from in Louvre Abu Dhabi to work as Fast and Furious, and now I'm joining a world where, in a way, heaven can wait. So it's also different of speed that we would like to reassess also. But yes, I think the department that I'm running now is one of the latest department created in the Louvre. It's 10 years old, so it's still a young department. So it needs this energy, new energy to bring in. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because it was the youngest department until Laurence just founded her Byzantine department, and yet I think the Louvre is seeking to redefine itself with a new head in Laurence Descartes, and so you're part of that team where I think barriers are probably being broken down and new things.
Yeah, I'm like excited to be part of that team and to be part of this new challenge. And speaking of this new department, the DAPCO, Department of the Byzance and the Christianity in the Orient, for us, for my department, it will be an opportunity, really an opportunity to open up and to consider this and to present the Islamic art, Islamic lands, Islamic civilizations quite in an open and in a connective way. And I think with my colleague Maximilien Durand, we'll have to write a common introduction. I mean, the roots are really there, roots are common, and then, and I think the exhibition that was mentioned, that I've just curated with the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, with Laurent Hérichet, about the three sacred texts of the monotheistic religions has here again opened up, I think, lots of perspective for this new, this new mise en scène of our both departments.
So Alexandra, what do you bring back to the Guggenheim after your deep dive into Abu Dhabi?
Okay, well, unlike Souraya, I never left the mothership. I was sort of on loan during this 5-year period and then fell madly in love and got all consumed. So I think that's a very interesting question. I mean, I think first, I really want to commend the Guggenheim for what we imparted to build this museum. And the enormous scholarship, including the curators and scholars who were not directly involved with the project, but whose perspectives and languages and cultures and areas of regional expertise in Asia especially, and Latin America especially, really helped inform the strategy that I just summarized to you. We are just now under the project director Stephanie Rosenthal building the team in Abu Dhabi. So it's a very different model than the Louvre. And eventually we will have a museum operating body with over 240 staff, that will be almost exclusively based in Abu Dhabi. What I learned was strategy. This project, working with the government and having to constantly produce these deliverables, really forced us to map out in very specific, both conceptual but practical terms, to articulate what your intellectual premise was going to be and how you were going to present that and activate that in a place that you didn't know very well. And I think that's something that I think I've brought back. Richard, what do you think? I mean, I think we both brought it back to the Guggenheim, and certainly in the Asian Art Initiative, in the UBS Global MAP Art Initiative, in the Robert H. and Ho Chinese Art Initiative. These were all initiatives that were very carefully conceived to jumpstart a different way of thinking and to get the institution to think strategically, to get the New York Guggenheim to think strategically about how it was going to evolve in the 21st century as a truly global institution. Not by what we were doing in the old days. Yes, we had international shows, but we never had in-house expertise. What does it mean to have in-house expertise? What does it mean to have 15 straight exhibitions of Asian art, which I was privileged to pull off, but not have a collection as a residue? So that means we have to have a circle, we have to have a patron circle. So we created an Asian art circle, we created a Middle East circle in order to activate and to raise funds for building acquisition, because if you don't have a collection, you don't have a residue of your thought, and you're not compelling future generations to continue to study this material in the context of the collection. So I think strategic thinking, also just, to be very particular, I think the Guggenheim is very, very far behind in our study of Arab art. And Richard used to say this institution, as it goes up, is going to be a tidal wave, and New York has to be prepared for this tidal wave, which is coming. It's coming. I feel we are very behind. We don't have yet an Arab. Well, we have one Arab curator who is associated with the Guggenheim project. I'm hoping that we can match what is coming in Abu Dhabi with our own response to expertise in our, we don't call it Islamic, we call it Arab world. Of course, with the Middle East Circle, we have brought in works. We've had the Tel Adnan show. But I feel we could be doing a lot more and should be doing a lot more. So advocacy, strategy and advocacy is what I've brought back.
Yeah, for me, thinking, I think the fact that we built, we participated, as you said, it's a teamwork, and there was many persons involved, but building the audience for me was really interesting, and something probably I will. How you create an audience, how you make people come to the museum where they're not used to come to the museum. This is a challenge we're all facing today in our world. So these are probably things that we will bring back in the new institution. Yeah, the question of the audience. I think the Louvre, Paris has paved the way in opening up the first museum without collection, the Lens Museum, that helped us greatly in curating Louvre Abu Dhabi. So creating institutions to global and local museums beyond the walls of the palace, and with the collection, or partly the collections of the Louvre. And in the case of Louvre Abu Dhabi, I think the model is really interesting because it's a kind of shared collection. So French loans, international loans as well, that we have developed throughout the years, and obviously the collection of Louvre Abu Dhabi.
I wanted to go to your core collection at the Louvre because you said something that I really didn't know, which is that heretofore your collection was considered decorative art and a kind of just decorative art. So do you want to speak about that and how it's been sort of recalibrated, as you were alluding to, with a greater understanding of what it is?
Yeah, definitely. Islamic art has been considered in the Western world, at least, beyond the calligraphy and the very classical calligraphy, as decorative arts. And what I would like to bring to my new department as a new perspective is this different perspective on the objects, notably in the medieval times, where objects was as rich as a book and holds like mental images. It really conveys or bring together so many different worlds, from craftsmanship to poetry, to music, and as I said, to some sort of mental image and a complete different universe. So I think this will be the next challenge, because how do you propose a new readings on objects considered and for so long as decorative art? But they are not only decorative art, they are like a world's speaking objects, as I call them. Yeah.
So I'm going to have one final question before we open it up to your questions, which have been very lively in this series. But just for the consistency of the publication, I thought I'd throw this out. It's the surprise question. Is there anything that you wished you could have done that you couldn't do?
In my career,
in this particular project, well, I mean, it's the end of my part of this talk, so you can address that any way you want.
Philippe is here, so I have to say something. I have to say one great regret is that in one of my more audacious moments along the way, I walked into Philippe's office and I said, "Philippe, I really think you should hire me." And this was before, do you remember that?
Very well.
Very well. And you know, this was well before the reorganization of the Met. It was well before the creation of the modern and contemporary department. And he said, yes, but Alexandra, what would I do with you? You know, do I put you in the Asian art department? To take the Asian art department, which was basically stopped at 1640. Anything after was considered decadent and late and derivative and beneath the, beneath curatorial consideration? Or do I put you in the modern, in Gary Tintereau's department, which had never looked, east of the Tiber, or south of the Seine. So that's a regret. But Leslie is there now in the reconstituted modern and contemporary department as its first dedicated curator of Asian art. And this is fantastic. So what I want to say, and what I think we all want to acknowledge, is how much the field, we're talking about major institutions, including the Met, if I may, over the last 20 to 30 years have really, really fundamentally redesigned themselves. And it restructured their idea of what it is to be an institution that operates in the West, but has the responsibility to rethink its own histories, to reflect on its own histories critically, and to look more rigorously at artists who are understudied, and to recognize those contributions to their own histories and to the histories that they represent in their collections and programs.
Yes.
But is there something that you wish that you could have done that you weren't able to do? And when you ask a director that, it's sort of different because they can blame that on forces outside, but for you, it's within an institution. I think it's slightly different.
On this latest project, I had so many opportunities that we could really put together, and there was an openness, a flexibility, a field of possibles that led to this beautiful museum. And it's an open conversation between those three institutions that I was mentioning. No, I think probably it's I hope I can do. I hope I can contribute really in shaping this new galleries in these old institutions. I would say that's probably here the challenge.
And do you know, how many months have you been there?
5 months.
5 months. So the Louvre
5 months.
But you know, I have to say, it's made me think that I run a leadership program for curators, and this year we have the person who's going to be responsible to build the new Pompidou in Jersey City. Ponder that. And so, I mean, that's going to be a whole new way of thinking about what happens where in the global arena. Sometimes New Jersey is considered, I don't know, crossing the Hudson. You never know. So anyway, we'll see. That could be part of another series of conversations as it emerges. But thank you very much, and I think it would be a good time to open up for what is always a lively conversation from the audience. So do you have any questions for these two? I'm sure many will emerge. Yeah, Joachim.
A question to Souraya.
Here, you need a...
As you know, Souraya, I was looking at the barely born, young, new department of Byzantine department, and had a chance to see the proximity of the two spaces, and they really are contiguous. And that led me to wonder how did the dialogue between you and Maximilian happen, or was there an earlier history to your connivence, as it were, to you.
I can assure you that there is a lot of dialogue, and that's probably what the challenge that I love, and what really excited me in joining back the Louvre and living Abu Dhabi. So it's really creating this sort of dialogue between the two departments. As you know, the spaces, and you probably walk through, we will have not only, we will have like really common areas, and we will be writing a common introduction, and we will have many points of contact. And I think this is perfectly new to the Louvre, the classic Louvre in Paris. I cannot develop further. I need to keep the surprise, but it's going on, and intellectually, curatorially, it's really interesting, and it will be the first time that it's done that way in the Louvre. It forces me as well to rethink the way, as I was mentioning, we present, and we talk about Islamic art, but a lot of point of connections, and probably some redisplay on the way. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that Alexandra may have talked about my greatest regret, but my question is for Souraya, which is, and I don't mean it to be disobliging, but I'm glad you began to talk about objects and giving them speech, so to speak. I don't remember your exact words. What flexibility do you have in that vast oceanic space that one begins? I mean, it's obvious for those who haven't been from the photographs, but what can you do with that space, and which was described when it was opened by a number of critics as one enters Islamic art through the pantry? So I think that's what you're likely to change.
Yeah. I know what you mean, and once again, that is a challenge, and I love challenges. When I went to Abu Dhabi like 10 years ago, it was a blank space and blank. There was like, we did everything, so I know the difficulty, I don't undermine them, but the rewriting with my colleague will be key, I think. And what flexibility I have, I think I have my, probably not a lot. We know institutions has it work, but I'm convincing, and I think I will definitely succeed in doing it. And I have this new energy. You are asking me what you bring back with you. Dreams, for sure. Energy, for sure, and a new curatorial approach, a new SCP, scientific and cultural program. But okay, we have to build with what we have. We have to work around the spaces. But we can, I mean, museographically, I have already in a way, my plan, and I want to work on the different points of entries of this very difficult space. I mean, you know, it's some of us internally, we call it the piscine, the swimming pool. So it's, we know the challenges, but you have, museographically speaking, those doors, in a way, or open spaces that have never been worked with. And then you have those dead spaces, in a way, where medieval times are like presented today from the Islamic period. And I mean, I have plans to bring this to life and to extirper those dark ages from those. But I don't want to develop too much, because as I was saying earlier, it's a work in progress, and I'm presenting my project or my plan to the president of the Louvre very, very soon. So obviously that is not easy for me to share, but I am very conscious of the difficulties of the space and of today the silo, which is created in a way by this department. It's the only department which is built in a courtyard, and there is a dialogue with the building that needs to be created beyond, I think, these beautiful ceilings, and yeah, let the object speaks, but with the help of the mediations, with the help of some renovation work, if possible.
Thank you.
La piscine, we call it.
This is for Souraya. First of all, I'm here, Patricia Lee. We also moved to Abu Dhabi about 10 years ago, and we lived on Saadiyat Island. So when the Louvre opened, it just meant so much to us. We drove our cars to this dusty car park, and then we would hop into the shuttle that took us to the Louvre, and everybody would be teary-eyed on the bus because it meant so much to have culture in Abu Dhabi. Like the Louvre in Abu Dhabi meant a lot to all of us. And here's the thing. When you go into the Louvre, you see, what the different civilizations were doing at each given time period. And this would be the only place in Abu Dhabi where you have people of all different classes and races. And if you go to, and some of you may know that it's very tiered in Abu Dhabi. You have the migrant workers, you have the Emiratis, you have the Western expats, and we all live in our own little bubbles. But you go to the Louvre, and we all, swirl around all the different exhibitions together. Everybody actually talked to each other. So it was really, really, that was the thing that was most striking to me. Of course, the architecture, the water, everything was very beautiful, but the impact it had on the community and how it mixed people was, I thought, really, really striking. I wonder, was that something that was by design, or was it a byproduct?
So, diverse audience. We have worked as a team, and a very diverse team, on building this audience. And I must say that right after the opening, the majority of the audience was tourists. And thanks really to COVID, we were, like all institutions, in a way forced really to work on developing our local network and local audience. But I must say that it's also not only an encouragement, but a wish of the government, like to really bring schools, university, to speak to the community, to the local community. So it is work. It's constant work. There is a department dedicated to education and all, which is doing like brilliant work. But I think it's also due this sort of community feeling that you were mentioning to the universal message of Louvre Abu Dhabi, and to this story of humanity that we tell through 12 chapters and four parts. Everyone recognize himself or find something of himself or of his community in the story that we tell. We take really the visitor from prehistoric time to present days, and chronology is important, obviously, but I would say that common rhythms and tempos are definitely the probably the defining line of the story. This dialogue also between shapes, between thematics, between artworks is really having an effect, the effect that you were mentioning. We have recently, before just I left the what I call a project, it's still a work in progress, the inclusion of contemporary art also in dialogue with archaeological, for example, artifacts or Renaissance painting is really also speaking to the audience and creating this sort of closeness and dialogue and openness that you were mentioning. The institution also is working towards the community, not only in terms of academia and pedagogy, but trying to create a safe haven, diversifying the offering, like creating yoga classes or kayaking around the museum. So it's really conceived as a museum, a city museum, a museum cities with permanent exhibition, with temporary exhibition, and here again in the programming of the temporary exhibition, we've worked really on emphasizing on the dialogue, the connection between civilization. I can mention probably 2 or 3 exhibitions that have been turning points in the programming. I remember a colleague of mine in Paris proposing to do a show on chivalry, European chivalry. And I told her, thank you, it's very interesting, but we need to connect it with the Furusilla, which is the equivalent, in shortcut, to the chivalry. And that's how we started really shaping and presenting different connected temporary exhibition. We had also a show that was really interesting between the connections of the Islamic lands and the Chinese or the Asian, it was Chinese in this case, art. So this is what we brought, a new perspective also on temporary exhibition, where we deepened the dialogue between civilization and art.
Thank you. That was a huge success.
I think it's time for a drink. Thank you so much for